Just some tips when you're hand watering. You always want to make sure you water deep. If you only water a little and you barely penetrate the surface of the soil, it will force the plant to keep its roots up at the top. That'll make it prone to being too hot from the sun, to being weak, not making it search down through the ground to have deeper roots. One of the ways that you can make sure you keep your water isolated around your plant area without having to install cups in the soil or things like that, which I have done before and works, is to simply make sure that you have this little divot around the plant. So this is a lower surface up than up here. And sometimes you can even make a more pronounced donut, like a rim around the plant, all the way around, right? So when you water it, it keeps the water isolated right around here and sends it straight down and waters it deep instead of letting the water run away off to the sides. Having your plants mulched also helps to keep the force of the water from lifting up the dirt, moving it around, creating low spots. This takes the brunt of the force of the water and allows it to be evenly distributed down. I do this with all of my plants, newly planted. I make sure I make this little rim, or at least have this divot area where the water can concentrate down here. So just like this, I have this on a soaker setting because it'll send more water out than the shower setting without it blasting a hole in the mulch like it would on the full setting. And I'm just letting it sit right here. Now you can see over there the water is staying in this area. It's pooling just for a second until it goes all the way down through the mulch and into the soil. It's more time efficient. You're getting deeper water depth and less waste. Another little pointer in regards to labeling. I usually try to stick a tag in the soil or some other form of labeling, and inevitably the tag gets lost or faded, and then I have no idea what the plant is. And then in the spur of a moment, I decided, since I had a stake here, I was going to write it directly on the stake in the Sharpie that I had on hand. So we'll see how long this holds up against the sun. I think that next time I would probably write it in a metallic Sharpie, but it was nice, it was quick, it was right here. This will last. The plastic bends and warps. So we'll see if that was a good idea or not, and maybe I'll still forget what this plant was. Just a little note on watering frequency. When you first install new plants or put in new seeds, you're probably going to have to water every day for maybe a week or so, and pay close attention to the plants themselves and see how their tolerance is building to the heat and the sunshine and the water. I don't like to water every single day. I feel like that makes for a weak plant that won't be able to handle the differences in the weather. But I need to make sure that they get established. So I've already watered these seeds, and to me that's considered getting them started. So if they get saturated with water and then they have multiple days of dryness, they're going to fail. Even seeds as tough as the contender beans. And these peppers were just planted over the weekend. So they did not get watered this morning, and when I came home from work, they were a little bit wilted, as you can kind of see from that one over there, which is completely normal. So we're giving them a second day's worth of watering, making sure we water them deep. And that's going to get them, I'm watering beans over here, and that's going to help them get established. And then once they get established and get over this stress of transplanting, we're going to start to wean off the watering and not water them as often. And that will help to get them a little bit tougher, make them send their roots down a little bit deeper, and that way they can handle the days when we might not get as much rain and maybe a little more heat, and they won't die or suffer or have stunted growth. For example, these plants over there, now that they're all established, even though I just set up the watering hose in them, got to the point where now I can water them once a week, twice a week, and they're fine. I still come out here and I look at them. They're strong, they're healthy, even these new plants. And then if I feel like I need to, or it's been really, really dry and really hot, I'll come out and water them. But I've been able to reduce those other beds down to about once a week, a nice deep watering. And that might be different for you and your area. You have to look at the plants and you have to sort of get a feel for it. But that, thankfully, in this season right now is what I was able to do. Once we hit our rainy season, I won't need to do this at all. They're just going to get inundated with rain. Another thing to keep in mind is accessibility of water. So yesterday, when I needed to get in the shade and I wanted to plant more things all about, I just went to places where I thought the sun would be appropriate for planting those things, knowing or realizing after the fact that it's not readily accessible to water. So for these areas, I have to get jugs or buckets and walk it over to where I've planted the plants to make sure that I water them every day for at least a week, and this needs a little more mulch. So that's a lot of work. So even though the desire to plant 1,000 plants all around the property is high, I have learned to do my best, like a itty bitty, to limit myself to what I think I can physically take care of for that transitionary week where you have to water them often to make sure that they make it through the transplant shock. So I have some on this side, I also have some on the other side, especially for areas like this where there's all this natural, very fluffy stuff that kind of just moves around and the water's there. I'd probably have to come back again and water that deep. And I have, oh boy, where'd it go? I have another one somewhere in here, which might just have to make it on its own if I can't find it. That looks terrible. And then knowing that I have to go back and forth to where I keep the hose and keep watering it. So the risk here, and I have run into this and it's normal and it's okay, is that knowing that the job is going to be tedious and long and a lot of work, and you've just worked a long day and come home and have to take care of other chores, we tend to put it off. And then we put it off. And then we put it off some more. And then life catches up with us and we have to put it off again. And then all of the excitement that we had and the hard work that we put in to plant these plants all around, these extra plants, will go to waste because they'll just die. So just plant what you think that you can, there you go, what you think that you can take care of on any given day or week until they get established. Otherwise, it's going to be heartbreak and a waste of your time. I don't know if you can tell. If you look closely, you can see there's a little bit of a divot here running along the line where I have the beans. Put down this hose right in through here. The edges are slightly raised up. I did that on purpose in the same way that I make the divots for the peppers and other plants, and that's to isolate the water into this line for when I water the beans. So that way the water doesn't run away everywhere, but it's kept isolated right into this area, and I could just put a ton of water right down through here, and it'll stay all in this track for the most part. Much more than if I didn't have the track in there. I don't know if you guys can notice, but all the little green bean leaves are turned towards the setting sun because it's in that direction. Even on the other side. I only noticed it because I'm on the back side of them watering some of the peppers. But they're all leaned that way, getting the most sun I can. And then in the morning, they'll turn back in the other direction. This here is a good example of what happens when you're watering something or trying to water it deep and you don't have mulch to help hold the soil down. The soil kind of just floats to the surface, which dislodges something that's newly planted or can dislodge it, and then gets the stem all dirty, or maybe even the leaves that are a little close, and then sometimes it leaves gaps. I didn't have time to grab some extra mulch and mulch around this. I just needed to get it in the ground, but that's what happens. So the mulch really helps to hold the soil down and gets the water directly where it needs to go. But as you can see, I did make the rim here and the divot, so it's at least keeping the water in this area, which is sending it down into the roots instead of spreading everywhere all around. And by the way, don't forget to shut off your water hoses. Last thing you need is that water and all of the hoses heating up and then stretching out the hose, which this one at some point along the way has. You'll see it start to bulge here, okay, if you keep the water in here. So best practice is to always shut it off, even though it's easier to access it and get to it when you have to go, hi Mr. Cluckers, long distances. And then even better is if you take a moment and drain out the excess water. So this is a good sign and a good way to see how tough your plant is getting. So while I'm allowing that one to go ahead and deep water, we'll look at this one. So this hasn't been watered since yesterday. It spent all day out in the sun, obviously, and there's no wilting at all. It looks happy, healthy, the stem is strong, the new leaves coming out are strong. Yesterday at the end of the day, it was a little wilty. The same thing over here. That one's nice and strong, and when I first came out here, they weren't wilty either. Now this one here is a little wilty. So this one, although it will absolutely survive, will definitely need a deep watering. Whereas even with this little guy, or this one over there, I could probably skip tonight's watering and they'd be fine, but I'm going to water them anyways. But this one, this is a sign that it needs to be watered. Some plants will do this normally when it's really, really hot out, and what it's doing is it's shunting the water from its leaves down to its root system so it can keep that healthy and alive. And when it cools off, it'll send the water back up into the cellular structure of the leaves and they'll be perky again. So what we want to see is the plant looking more like this and not like this, to give us a sign of whether or not we can start weaning off the watering. This one over here is good and nice and strong. This one is just a little bit. That one's fine, and that one's fine. So I'm still gonna water all of these, just like I watered all of those, because they were just planted on Saturday and Sunday, and it is only Tuesday. But tomorrow, depending on how they look at the end of the day or when I get home, I might skip them and just water the green bean seeds that are deep down in there. Hi, Juno. Hi. You good boy. For that volunteer Everglades tomato, I decided to leave here and allow it to take over. Well, we're getting flowers already. Look at that. Oh, these are the best. They're so tiny, but it's like a punch in your face of flavor. It's amazing. We've got another little cluster right there, and I thought I saw other flowers. Oh, here we go. Right there. Those are gonna open probably by tomorrow morning. and we're gonna start getting delicious little tomatoes that you can eat raw. I've turned them into quick spaghetti sauce, thrown them into chili, scrambled eggs, anything. It brightens the dish right up. They're super sweet. They're so delicious. I think I've talked a little bit too much about how good they taste, but that's awesome to see. You know, I had big aspirations this week to get out and plant a little bit more in the hour or so I have after work, but it's just as well that I'm not, because as I said earlier, you really need to only plant what you feel like you can take care of through the mosquito transition period, to make sure that they all stay healthy and strong and watered. And I just barely have enough time to water all of these plants that are sort of far off on the edges, that don't have an access to a hose before it gets too dark, or I have to go inside and work on supper. So it's worked out. And what is on my screen? That's a bug. It's worked out, and then by the end of this week, these plants should be established, and I can reduce the watering frequency and move on to planting new things. So overall, just now, I saved a significant amount of time, allowing this to just sit there and water this plant after I filled up a little jug and then ran the jug to the other plants and watered those. Like 2 hoses running at once, which I used to have, but I don't right now. So I'm working with what I got. But it must have cut down my overall watering time by half. And then each plant got a nice deep watering, and they're going to be all set. And honestly, a lot of them, from the looks of them, I might be able to skip tomorrow's watering and then just do the next day. But of course, I'll come out here and see what they look like. There's some that are a little bit weaker that I'll probably still water, but the earlier I can wean them off of requiring deep watering, the better. Last little pointer is to try to multitask whenever you can. So I want to deep water these peppers, but I also have some plants back there on the other side of that fence that I need to water, that this hose won't reach to and my other hoses won't reach to, and I don't have anything piped in back there. So as I'm getting sprayed in the face, I'll fill up the bucket, and then I'll sit the hose on the ground to deep water the plant while I'm walking the water all the way to the back. So that cuts down my time of having to just sit here and wait and hold the hose over this plant while I go and water the other plants in the back. So that can just sit there, deep water that spot. I'm not going to step in the gingerbread that hasn't sprouted yet. And then we go work from farthest away in and go and water these guys while that other pepper is getting watered. I'll probably do this a second round so it gets a good amount of water. An interesting thing about these peppers, on a side note, these are Berry's Crazy Cherry. I haven't grown them before, but they start off with this funky curl to their leaves, which normally isn't a good sign, but they all open up to this normal, beautiful leaf, and every one of them is doing it. So I was a little concerned at first, but that's normal for this. I hear Dallas. Hi, buddy. Hi. You say hello? Good boy. Okay, bye.